Well, hi, and welcome to the Christian Contrast, where we talk about how walking with Jesus leads us to a different life than those in the world around us. I'm excited for this episode, joined by Andy Watson, our worship pastor.
Yeah, excited to be here with you,
For
Dan.
sure. And we are in this season of Lent, and so we're going to be talking about Lent. This is something, we can talk about this a little bit. I did not grow up knowing what Lent was. I was not only in a Protestant church, but I was in about as casual a Protestant church as you could think of. I don't even remember Christmas Eve services, certainly not Good Friday, not Ash Wednesday, Lent, I had no idea. So for you, our church has started to participate a bit more in some of these sort of church calendar events. Yeah. For you, how did that fit into your upbringing?
So I grew up in the Church of England, which is an Anglican church. My dad was ordained in the Church of England, and but you know, I was trying to think back. I don't remember as a family, and maybe if my parents watch this, they'll correct me. I don't remember. I'm sure they did stuff for Lent, but it wasn't like, hey, we're all gonna participate in this. Now we certainly all did Pancake Tuesday, which is big in England. The day before Lent kicks off on Ash Wednesday. But in my adulthood, I was on staff at an Anglican church, then a Methodist church before coming here, and man, that was a pretty big part of what we did. We were pretty intentional in following the church calendar, and you know, I've just had such great experiences in my walk with the Lord by engaging with the practice of Lent. And you know, Ash Wednesday is something that we didn't used to practice before I came here, and was just talking with Gary Keith, our previous lead pastor, about it, and with you, and just how do we bring this into what we're doing here? And man, just our people really responded. And so those Ash Wednesday services, we just had one this past week. Those are honestly, they're probably my favorite services of the year. Obviously Good Friday, Christmas Eve, and Easter, those are powerful services. But I think just the worship and the way people engage and respond is like nothing just at that level is just so much bigger than we see, and it's wonderful. Yeah. I love getting to be a part of that.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I've said this before, but my first Ash Wednesday service was our first Ash Wednesday service as Life Bible Fellowship Church, and I remember us the first year we were doing it, we were hanging out in the worship center beforehand, trying, anytime we do something new, we always do this. We say, how many people are going to come?
Oh my goodness.
Because we didn't do the hard sell. We didn't want anybody to feel like they must come or there was some biblical mandate. We'd encourage people, but we really didn't try to coerce people. And so I was thinking in my head, man, if we have 120 people here, that's going to be awesome. Yeah. Like that to me would be like a surprising turnout for a Protestant church that's not terribly liturgical. And when we ended up having, I don't remember, but over 300 people.
Yeah, certainly. It was 350 something.
Yeah, and it's been consistently well attended without us sort of pushing it as some sort of must. I think it has reflected something, and I know that this is true of me, of somebody that grew up in very low church. There is a craving that God has put in us for reverence and for the divine. And so as Protestants, and especially as maybe non-denominational Protestants, I think we rightly recognize that the ritual is not enough.
Sure.
That the ritual can be empty.
Yeah.
I think maybe the danger in there is that we just totally cast off the idea of sort of ritual or symbol and recognizing that there is this deep significance and there is this longing for us to have these physical, tangible reminders of these spiritual realities, just sort of like with communion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Ash Wednesday, a big part of it is thinking about the idea of our mortality. And, from ashes we were created and dust will return. And in the same way, oftentimes I'm around our church when funerals are happening, and getting to attend a funeral of someone I don't know, but just almost getting to listen and hear and just be reminded of life is short, and our time here on earth is short, and so are we living for eternity? And so that Ash Wednesday service is, man, just such a great reminder of what's important, and then leading into Lent and of just taking stock of my life, of my spiritual walk, of just some of the practices. And it's not always fun.
No.
It's not always easy. But I think it's really important that we do that.
Yeah. And so for people either in our church or just anybody listening to this unfamiliar with the idea of Lent, Lent is kicked off by Ash Wednesday. Mm-hmm. It's 40 days leading up to, in most traditions, leading up to Good Friday, mm-hmm. which is the end of those 40 days. And it's a period of reflection, in some traditions, of extra generosity and giving, mm-hmm. Of repentance, and then of fasting.
Yeah.
And certain traditions, like with Catholicism, there's some sort of prescribed fast where on Fridays you don't eat meat.
Yeah, a lot of fish Fridays.
A lot of fish Fridays, which, yeah, if you're a Protestant, you might be kind of confused by that idea. But kind of in wider circles like ours, the fasting has tended to be broadened out to say, all right, we want to fast, we want to give up something for mm-hmm. this period of time. In order to participate in this greater sense. Jesus fasting for 40 days, even the idea of the Israelites being in the wilderness for 40 years, that's where the 40 kind of comes mm-hmm. from. And thinking about this, so I'm curious for you, Lent has been something that you've participated in. We always say this is an opt-in. You're not in disobedience to God if you don't do this. What's been some of the process that you've gone through when you've been looking to discern what Lent might look for you each year?
Yeah. Honestly, I can say throughout my different years of practicing Lent, there have been some really good years and some really bad years. And I think it may have even been last year. I got halfway through and I just really felt like I wasn't doing this for the right reason. And it was just becoming, it wasn't grace-filled. And so I ended up just kind of stopping what I was doing and kind of reevaluating a little bit. So even entering into this year, I decided to be a bit more gentle with just some of the expectations I was putting on myself. And so we just decided one day a week we're going to fast just during the day and then breaking the fast in the evening. And so I think, obviously the different things, social media is a big one that we talk about, or TV, or just how we spend our time. There is something unique about giving up food, right? I don't know anything else that I give up that just is this constant reminder of I'm uncomfortable. And when you give up food, man, that sense of how easy it is to turn to God because of that discomfort. And so that has been really helpful in my journey of processing Lent and my walk with the Lord. And I don't like giving up food. It's hard. I'm not good at it. Fasting is a discipline that you almost have to train into more. And I don't know, is the fasting for food thing, has that been a big part of your journey throughout the years?
It hasn't. There have been seasons of time, and it's interesting the way you were talking about it. The phrase you used is sort of being gentle with yourself, or maybe even accepting the Lord's gentleness. Within that, one of my mantras, and I don't know that this serves me well in every circumstance, but in most, I think it does. Is that when I feel urged by the Holy Spirit to start a new habit or to engage in something new that hasn't been a part of my life, one of the questions I always ask in evaluating how I'm going to enter into it is, what do I think I'm actually willing to do? Now, the danger of this could be that you undersell the transforming power of the Holy Spirit to take us beyond our comfort zones. But I know for me, anytime I'm entering into this, it's already outside of my comfort zone. And so I do sort of evaluate the question like, okay, I'm saying, I think of coming back from camps when I was in junior high and high school, and I'm never going to sin again. And I'm going to tell all my friends about Jesus every day of my life. And, after a couple of days, you abandon it because it's not sustainable. So fasting at different times, the most success that I found with fasting from food is when I fast basically from breakfast to dinner.
Yeah.
Where I eat breakfast, and I try not to be like, man, I'm going to gorge, but I eat a good solid breakfast, and then I break my fast at dinner.
Yeah.
And for me, that's felt like, okay, I can do this. I am willing to do this, and I can handle this reasonably. But man, you're right. There's no other thing I fasted from other than food that brings that level of discomfort. It certainly is the biblical norm. We've
Right.
broadened fasting out, but that's the biblical norm. And I think so much of fasting, when I think of, probably my favorite verse on fasting, not that there's a ton to choose from, but Jesus talking about this because he's asked why his disciples aren't fasting according to sort of the normal Jewish way of fasting. And his response to them in Matthew 9, verse 12, Matthew 9, verse 15, is he says, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them. Then they will fast." So even I know for some people, they look at Lent and they're like, this is this weird ritualistic. Yeah, you don't need to practice Lent. Jesus seemed to presume that fasting was going to be a part of our lives. And so the idea, and he connected it to the idea of sort of mourning and longing for him. And so, for a lot of years, I've done something media related during my Lent fasting. It's been really fruitful.
Yeah.
This year, I decided to go back to something food related. It doesn't need to be a big secret. I decided to fast from chocolate, which for me, I'm like, I don't regularly gorge on chocolate, but in any given day, I snack on chocolate at several points a day.
Right.
I'm a big fan. And it was funny because I remember Ash Wednesday, and this was like 9 a.m., being in my office, and all I wanted was to walk over to the peanut M&Ms, and my body actually had this aching, and then I had this weird sense of, I've made a mistake, 40 days, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
But then there was this really cool moment, and a mantra that I've tried to encourage people towards and that I've used for myself is to say, Jesus, I want you even more.
Yes,
and it can sound kind of trivial. I mean, chocolate is a luxury,
right?
But just having that sense of it's a good gift, and that's part of fasting, is fasting from something good. It's not, we should be fasting from pornography all the time.
Right.
We should be fasting from gossiping all the time. It's not the same thing. But to say this is a good gift from God, meant to be celebrated, and when I find myself aching for it, I want to say, gosh, Jesus, I want you even more. And so those have been the times for just concerted prayer and turning to him and rejoicing in him. And it's good because there's those constant reminders. It's like Karina gets these great dark chocolate squares. It's like in the evening, I'll have like at least 2 of them. And it's just one of my favorite things about my winding down routine. Not having them, small as it is, it disrupts my flow. Right. And that, I think, is a big part of fasting, certainly with food, where it disrupts your flow enough to give you that opportunity to draw near to the Lord.
Yeah. One of the things that I really appreciated this year is how you emphasized on Sundays, kind of taking a rest or a break from whatever you're fasting from. And, is that something that was just unique for you this year, or what led you to kind of...
Well, it was interesting because as I was mentioning, Lent was all new to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years into us just encouraging people to do Lent, where I did the math and realized this isn't 40 days. And I was confused by it.
Right.
So, did a Google search, as you do, and found out, the idea of this is that Sundays are not part of the fast. And I kind of liked that idea just about, we frequently, when we'll talk about Easter, I'll say, for us as Christians, every Sunday is Easter. Every Sunday is a mini Easter celebration because that's why we meet on Sundays. The Lord rose on a Sunday. And it was interesting because I didn't really talk about it in the past with our church, but I remember talking about it with my kids because our kids, and we always made it optional. We said, you don't have to do anything for Lent, but they've always chosen to do something, fasting from chocolate, fasting from YouTube, a number of different things that they've done. And I remember a few years ago starting to tell them, hey, Sundays is actually it, but I think I presented it more as like, it's okay. Hey, on Sundays, it's okay. And they all kind of said, I get that, but I'm still going to fast on Sundays, which I was like, maybe that's good. They wanted to follow through. I wanted this year to give the heart of that because I think that there is a joy and a celebration within that. And just as a reminder of we're building towards the Easter celebration. So it was funny because one of my boys is fasting from eating chips, which if you know my kids, that's a huge thing.
Big deal.
It's a big deal. And he knew I was fasting from chocolate. And so
has his chocolate intake gone up and your chip intake gone up?
He eats chocolate in front of me flagrantly. I had a bowl of chips and salsa in front of him.
That's good.
But on Sunday, we were both partaking in that. Like all of us were sort of partaking in that in a cool way. And there was this sense. I remember looking at my son who was enjoying that and saying, it's a mini Easter.
Yeah.
And just getting to tie in that celebration. There's new life. We're enjoying the good gifts from the Lord.
Yeah.
So much of this, I was hoping that as a congregation, we could get into the heart of it, because I think that there's great beauty in this, partly because we're doing it all together.
Yeah.
In fact, just last night, I was talking to a friend who's a believer, but he's not a part of our church. And he was talking about his, first of all, he was saying, I kind of was late. I wasn't able to make our Ash Wednesday service. I haven't been fasting, but maybe I'll go a couple days after Easter. And I was just kind of encouraging him, hey, like the whole purpose of this is to draw near to Jesus. He's not upset with you. Yeah. But the other thing that he said is he thought something that was so good about the Lent fast is that you're doing it as a community. And so even if you're doing different things, even if, you're in a life group, one of you is fasting from media, the other is fasting, like you're maybe there once a week fasting for the whole day. Somebody else is fasting from chocolate. Somebody else is fasting from alcohol, hopefully not in a way of like, I have a problem, but they're enjoying the good gift of alcohol and they're saying, I'm going to sacrifice that there's a sense of all together still being united and saying, we're looking to remove a distraction. We're looking to ache for Jesus. Yeah. And we're building towards reflection in anticipation of our celebration of Easter. Yeah.
And, I feel like oftentimes God, during this season for me, is intentional to point out areas in my life that maybe he wants to work on, and things that, we all have a vast array of things that need to be transformed. We are new creatures, new creations. We've been talking about that in Ephesians. But there is still the sin residue, the old man that tries to cling on. And I feel like in this Lent time, it is almost being okay with looking at the inner self and acknowledging the broken parts of us and the pieces that God does want to redeem and transform. And so I'm thankful for that. That is a journey that is hard, though. But I think if we don't go there, then we don't get to experience the joy and the freedom and the intimacy with Christ that he wants for us.
Yeah. I think it is similar to what you were saying earlier with the Ash Wednesday kind of service and practice that we go through there. Like I remember our first Ash Wednesday service, I was administering Ash. Again, never had done this before, never had it done to me before. And as the line started and I was saying each time, remember that you are dust and to dust you will return, the gravity of it really hit me hard. And part of it was, and you've alluded to this, but seeing some people who are older and thinking, chances are good I'll be at their memorial. I might even be doing their memorial. And then seeing Karina and the boys come up and just having the sobering reality that, God willing, my boys will all outlive me.
Yeah.
But saying each of my sons, if Jesus doesn't come back one day, will die. And there was this weird sense of the mark of death on us, in some sense with the ash, of us coming to grips with our mortality and with the brokenness of that. And that's why we need a resurrection.
Right.
And I think what we are talking about with the asking God to search us and with, coming face to face with the mirror of ways that sin still has a grip on us and ways that our flesh still is ruling us. It's unpleasant in the same way that, if you put on 50 pounds and you look in a mirror, you're like, I don't like this mirror. It's like, well, the mirror is revealing something to you. And I think that there is a lot of beauty, and I think that the fasting can help with this. I also think, that this might feel like a weird connection, but in my head it makes sense. Jesus tells, it's sort of like a proverbial truth and also sort of maybe a parable where he talks about the idea of a man who was possessed by a demon, and the demon was cast out, and then it went about, but then it went back and found the man, and like the floors were swept, everything inside of him was nice and neat, and the demon brings 7 other demons with him to dwell. And I think part of what Jesus is getting at is the whole idea of we need to replace the evil that's being cast out with the good.
Yeah.
And so just the idea of like, well, this man had this great good thing happen to him and this horrible evil removed, but he hadn't done anything about it. He hadn't replaced that with Christ at the center.
Yeah.
And so much of this time, I think, is saying, hey, it's good, but if all this is that we get to Good Friday or Easter and we're like, I did it. I was able to persevere and not eat chocolate for this time or not look at YouTube. That's, I don't know, maybe it's better than nothing. It's not great. But if we say, I chose to allow that to free me up for introspection and prayer. And so I'm always also looking and encouraging people, add something in.
Yeah, totally.
And that whole idea of, all right, we're casting out, the food, the chocolate, the YouTube, the, social media. What's coming in there? It's something positive that's bringing us renewal. And I do think that really opens the door for maybe us to be more attentive to the voice of the Lord, because there's something that normally has been an automatic for us that's disrupted. We're already a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe we're ready to hear what we haven't heard before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have there been, you were just alluding to, you feel like there are times where that's happened with you. Any encouragement just for people listening to this saying, gosh, that sounds good. Like, that's right. That is uncomfortable, but I want that. What might be a way to put themselves in a position for that?
My friend Terry and I wrote that song, I Remember. And it's based on, I forget the Psalm number, but it's talking about David. Just, God, I feel like I'm in this barren land. I feel like I'm struggling. Where are you? Like, all my tears are spent, and I'm crying on the inside, and just kind of the hardship. And but I remember you've always been faithful, and just using these type of songs and leaning into the Psalms in these honest ways of like just getting to come before the Lord and share what's really going on. I was talking with a friend yesterday, and she was just sharing how a lot of times as Christians, we try to act like everything's great and life's perfect and we don't deal with hardship. And she was describing a really hard season in her life, and the kind of the beauty of getting to come honestly before the Lord with that, with our shame, with our guilt, with our sin, with our depression, with our worry, with our fear, and like not hiding that from God, but saying, God, this is where I'm at. This is the struggles that I'm having. Love me here. Come into this. Holy Spirit, will you heal this? Will you help me? And I trust you. Your word says I can trust you, that you are my refuge, my hiding place. And the Psalms are great for this. And so, getting to spend some intentional time in the Psalms and trying to seek out those kind of songs and just worshiping privately, I'd really encourage people to do that. Obviously, the celebratory songs about God and who He is and what He's done for us, and the good news of the gospel and Jesus rising. Man, all of those are amazing. But if we never sing songs of lament, I really feel like we're missing out on kind of the full scope of worship and the Christian experience that God has for us.
Yeah, and just sort of knowing how to do that instead of trying to skip. I think sometimes we feel bad that we feel bad.
Yeah.
We're sort of like, the fruit of the Spirit is joy. I shouldn't be feeling
totally
this way.
Well, and it can be, we don't just want to focus on our problems in our own self. I think, excuse me, I think it's really important that we turn to the Lord in that. Whereas it can be easy just, oh God, I can't hear you. I'm frustrated. The enemy's attacking me. I feel weak. I'm struggling with all this. That's a different thing than, God, I feel weak and I'm struggling. Come into this. God, I need you and I trust you. And I remember last year when I was struggling with something similar, and you came, you rescued me, you redeemed me. And so that's a different thing than just focusing on the negative.
For sure. Not kind of wallowing in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. when I do think, and this is not just a Lent truth, but I think is a wider truth, that I think there are a lot of us that are like, I want to hear from the Lord. We don't have very much quiet in our lives.
We don't want very much quiet.
Well, yeah, and that's part of why we don't get it. We're constantly filling things with noise, even when there are potential quiet moments. We're like, this is uncomfortable. Let me put on some music or a podcast or a TV show and fill this in.
And, one of the things, I'm a big fan of John Eldridge, and he has a new book that I just started reading that came out. And he was saying in just the first chapter that we are disciples of the internet. And what that has done to us is we expect the immediate in everything. And God doesn't work like that. When he speaks to us, it's not always immediate. He wants kind of the mystery and the waiting and the anticipation. And we don't like that because we've been trained, conditioned into something completely different. And I think what you're describing of hearing God's voice and walking with him makes it so much harder. And that's not necessarily our fault. Like growing up in this season of life, it just makes it that much harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's odd that we have to sort of go far against the grain and be very purposeful if we're going to get that quiet.
Right.
I know I was reflecting on this because I've been doing something new in my devotional life. Where I realized I was still sort of doing things, but I was sort of rushing through it. And so I lately, for the past probably 3 weeks, have just been, when I sit down, I've just been setting a timer on my phone for 30 minutes, really just to say, I'm going to make sure I'm not rushing here, because, I'll read the word, I journal a little bit about that, and that's some of that is prayer. And then I'm usually, I have certain prayers that I pray for my family. I pray those 4 elements of spiritual warfare that I encourage people to pray, where I acknowledge the battle, I grab onto the truth, I receive God's love in a really cool, active way, and then I exercise my faith. But one of the things, even within that's happened, is usually I sort of get done with all this stuff that I want to make sure I do, and there still is a little bit of time. And then I'm sort of like, well, what now? What do I do with these last 3 or 4 minutes?
Right.
And one of the things that I realize is, I'm not waiting in quiet. The things I've been doing have been great, and I've loved it, and God has really moved through those. But just realizing, even within that, sometimes we need to just, even if it's just, hey, set a timer on your phone for like 3 minutes. Maybe 10 minutes you'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Maybe it's just 1 minute that we start with, but just to say, I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to ask the Lord to speak to my heart. And the hard thing is, maybe you come away and you're like, I don't know. I don't know. But maybe the craving goes up. Maybe we say, all right, God, I'm going to come back to you. There's a lot about patience in the Bible. What you were saying was making me think of the Jacob wrestling with God story about how bad do you want the blessing? I am not letting go of you until you bless me. Sometimes I think that's what it's like to be with God in prayer, to say, I'm not going to stop coming to you until you give me peace, or until you give me guidance on this thing that I don't feel like I know how to handle.
Well, the persistent widow.
Persistent widow, for sure.
Yeah, I was reading that this morning.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah. Well, for anybody, by the time this is released, we'll be about a week into the season of Lent. Part of my encouragement to anybody listening to this is, if you're like, oh, that sounds really cool, it's too bad I'm too late. No, you're not. You jump in, participate in this. This is about a heart. It's not about a strict 40 days. But for anybody who is participating in this, any final encouragements just about how best to engage during this season?
Well, I think one of the things you talked about at the beginning was the beauty of Lent is doing it together in community. And so, in the Bible, we're told not to brag about fasting. But I think there's a way to talk about it with humility, and that way we can encourage each other in our walk with the Lord and how we're engaging. So my encouragement would be to share with fellow believers that that are participating in this, and just ask, how is God speaking to you? And maybe what are some of the challenges? How is he revealing his love to you, but also the areas he's bringing up that he wants you to turn over to him?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I love, and you're right that I think sometimes we misunderstand the heart of Jesus' instructions about fasting, where it's not about bragging, and so we do need to be careful about that. But there is, in the same way that we can talk about prayer in a redemptive way. Hey, here's what I'm doing in my prayer life, and here's how God is speaking to me. I think during a period where a lot of us, we kind of know, are doing something that as families or as life groups or as friends, we can just talk about this in a way that's not self-aggrandizing, that's saying, here's what I chose to do. Because for me, even whenever I'm talking about this, one of the things that it brings up for me is my own weakness, where I'm like, all I did was give up chocolate, and oh my gosh, I am such a weakling. Like this is disrupting my life. But here's how the Lord is speaking to me. And man, we want that from each other, and we want that for each other. And somebody might share and be like, this has been awful. Like this has been really hard, or God's revealed some dysfunctions and sins, and I've been really discouraged. That's a chance for us to bond together in this. And so I totally agree with you, taking advantage of
and then praying for one another in those moments.
Absolutely. Praying for God to move. Well, this is a season. We do love this season. Once again, this is fully opt-in. This is if we say, hey, we love Jesus. We want to draw near to him. We feel like this is a good way to do it. And a lot of us enjoy doing that. I hope that this season is going well for you. I hope that this season is something that is rich and that will be rich, and looking to draw near to Jesus during this time. And this episode has just been about encouraging us in how best we can approach that. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen. If you want to comment with feedback or questions, or even with sharing a way that the Lord has been at work in your life as you've entered through this season, you're absolutely welcome to do that. We post all of the episodes of The Christian Contrast to our YouTube page for Life Bible Fellowship Church, and also to our website at lbf.church. So if after listening to this, you found this to be an encouraging thing in your walk with the Lord, you can go back and you can find all kinds of episodes on all kinds of topics. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks so much for listening to The Christian Contrast.